This episode of FPA Live is brought to you by the American Heart Association. The American Heart Association's professional advisor network helps you offer clients meaningful estate and philanthropic solutions while advancing their financial and legacy goals. Connect with peers, share your expertise, and help shape meaningful legacies. Scan the QR code or visit heart.org/FPA to join today at no cost. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to FPA Live, where we have conversations with interesting people doing interesting things in and out of financial planning. I'm Ben Lewis with the Financial Planning Association, and today's guest is someone whose impact on this profession and on FPA itself cannot be overstated. Bill Carter is not only a pioneer in financial planning, but also one of the central figures in the formation of the Financial Planning Association 25 years ago. As we continue to mark this important milestone in FPA's history, we thought it was the perfect time to sit down with Bill to revisit the origins of our organization, what brought the IAFP and ICFP together in 2000, the tensions and hopes that shaped that merger, and what the founding vision was all about. But this isn't just a history lesson. It's a conversation about purpose and where we go from here. Bill's perspective, drawn from decades of leadership and dedication to the profession, offers lessons that not only those who remember the merger, but especially for those newer to FPA who are shaping the next 25 years. So let's go ahead and bring Bill in. Everybody, Bill Carter.
Good morning.
Good morning. Well, I know I'm on the East Coast.
You're in a whole different time zone than
I'm
me.
in a whole different time zone.
I
It's
got you.
12:37 for me. But Bill, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm excited about this because you and I actually talked earlier this year about getting on FPA Live to talk about them. And I know we had a couple bumps in the road in terms of getting you scheduled. So look, at least I got you in under the gun of the end of the year coming. So thank you for taking the time.
Well, thank you.
So, you and I have had an opportunity to talk off and on over several years, but really this year, like we actually did a big video and we interviewed you and everything. And I just thought your perspective was so key. So what I'm going to ask you to do here for a little bit for us is to take us back to 2000. What was that environment like in the profession leading up to the merger of IAFP and ICFP?
Well, I think you have to go back. Let me just give you a little history. We talked about this last time.
Mm-hmm.
Back in, I guess it was 85, Herky Harris and I met with Bill Anthos and proposed the idea of a merger to him because we felt we had to have the college support before we talked to the ICFP. And then we went to them and talked to them, and they were open to it. We actually had a couple of meetings. One was right here in Dallas, and the second one was in Chicago. Well, during our second meeting, they got this big package in, and we found out later that was probably the result of the lawsuit between the Delphi and the College for Financial Planning, which set up the new IBCFP board. I think it was called the International Board for Standards and Practices for Certified Financial Planners, later shortened, thank goodness, to CFP Board of Standards. But anyway, and so those negotiations fell apart. A few years later, under Eileen Sharkey on the ICFP side and Larry Carroll on the IAFP side, they tried it again. And that blew up. And it went well for 3 or 4 days because I was getting calls from both of them because they knew how strongly I believe these two organizations needed to merge. And it looked good until the last day. And before the last day, I got a call at about 11 o'clock at night. So it had to be 12 o'clock over in Atlanta from Eileen Sharkey. Said, Bill, this thing's blowing up. And to kind of shorten it down, it all had to do with the Registry for Financial Planning. And they hadn't worked out a way on how they were going to handle that. And I had told both groups, I told Eileen, you've got to have a solution or it won't work when they get down to sign the dotted line. They're not going to give it up unless you've got some kind of solution for it. And that's exactly what happened. And so it died down again. And then it came back up in the 1998, 99, 2000 era when they finally merged. And that was something that needed to be done, but we still had the big problem, which was the registry. So when I was chair-elect of the CFP board, we were at a board meeting in Denver, and I came up with the idea that maybe the CFP board should buy the registry
Hmm.
and remove it, because that board's a standard setting board. People consider the registry a standard setting group because it's set to high standards for practitioners. And Tom Potts was kind enough to let me present that to our board. They were very skeptical, but they said that would be great if it would eliminate the conflict. So then I called Tony Green, and Tony presented the idea to him, and Tony just cracked up laughing. He said, Bill, I'd love to get rid of the registry because we've had the 1,000th member about 1,000th time. And, I would love to get rid of it. He said, our board doesn't share my thoughts.
Hmm.
And I said, well, would you give me the opportunity to talk to him? He said, we're going to be in Dallas in a couple of months. Yeah, you can come speak. So I went to them with no expectations of being able to convince them, because I knew how strongly ingrained that was. And I got some open minds. Ross Levin and another couple of people on the board said, maybe we need to talk about this.
Hmm.
And so that's where it all started. And so I began to move forward with that and was talking to both groups. I also knew that I had to do a lot of spade work. And so I had credibility because the registry had come in when I was president of the IAFP. And everybody knew I'd been a very strong backer of it, because I had strongly believed we needed to identify practitioners from just regular CFPs that were wholesalers or just product salesmen or something.
Sure.
And really wanted to identify the true professionals. And so I went around, I started calling everybody I could. I called the guy that headed the registry committee. And, obviously he wasn't going to be in great favor of it, but at least, he was kind enough to listen. And so I just started doing a lot of digital media. I flew all over the country on my own nickel to talk to leaders and talk to people on the committee to try to open them up. Well, that took a long time to get everybody in agreement. But finally, I got the CFP board that said, yes, we'll buy it. And I got them sold on a price they would pay. And then went back to the IAFP leadership, and they said they would sell it. I got them to accept the price. And the one thing I did through all of this was I said, look, these kind of things come up all the time. And here's the problem, guys. We have all this visionary stuff up here, and it's all great, and everybody agrees with it. Then we start to implement it. We get down here in the weeds, and the weeds kill it.
Sure.
That happened many times in our profession. And we've seen it in other things, not just our profession. And so I gave that speech 1,000 times, I think, to people. Just keep it up here and keep it out of the weeds. At the very last meeting, the CFP board, we had to pass a motion. We were going to meet with the IAFP later the next day about signing the agreement. One of my board members came up and said, well, Bill, I think we're paying too much money. Well, I've had 2 years of work, and now all of a sudden you're saying we've already been through this argument 3 times.
Sure.
And so I went back to my speech. You got the vision, you got the weeds. We're going back in the weeds. We got to get back up here. And I told them nobody's going to remember what the heck we paid for it 2 weeks from now, much less 2 years from now. And that's true. I couldn't even remember today what the CFP board paid for it. And so we got it through, and it agreed. So when the two got together, they didn't really have anything to argue about.
Sure.
They just had nothing to argue about. And so they brought it together. And let me tell you, there were some really good leaders. And I'm sure you're going to interview them from both the IAFP and the ICFP. And I won't mention their names because I'd get out of the 2 groups, I'd probably leave somebody out and they'd get mad at me. But let me just go on record saying you had 2 strong groups of leadership. And that's tough because you got big egos and a lot of history in each time. So I give them tremendous credit for being able to bring this thing. All that just says that's the way it should be. If you go back in Dallas, it was always funny because we had presidents of the IAFP and the ICFP out of my office.
Sure.
And I'd go to these meetings. I say, yeah, we're the same folks. Why don't we have 2 groups? We got 2 executive directors, 2 marketing people. It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And I believe that is back when in the early 80s when I was on the IAFP board. And I think everybody knew that, but like you say, or like I say, it's the devil in the details. And we went from everybody believed in this vision that just got caught up in the weeds, but they got through that.
Right.
So the leaders of that group, I guess is around 2000, you have to give them a lot of credit.
Absolutely. And you kind of hit on, I mean, you know, two different organizations, two different executive directors, both not necessarily fighting for the same space, but they're all kind of focused on the same mission. That's
Yeah.
elevating financial planning, growing a profession,
Yeah.
and so on. And I'll reflect, the day that at FPA retreat earlier this year when you and I sat down and spoke, I also talked to, Dave Yeski and Elisa Bowie, and Elisa Bowie made the point. I think I brought Elisa's name up on FPA Live at least a dozen times over the last year. So, Elisa, giving you another shout out. She talked about how the merger was less to do about resources and it was more to do about shared values. And I wonder if you can maybe reflect on that a little bit. Like, what did you perceive to be those shared values between IAFP and ICFP that led to the merger happening?
Well, I think there's two different tracks. One, wanting to do best what was the ultimate client, the customer.
Hmm.
And I think everybody shared that. Everybody wanted to improve, make people, provide a framework people could become financially independent. And that's kind of what the whole thing of financial planning is: get people to where they can retire and not have to worry about money. I mean, that's kind of the whole purpose of financial planning. Well, that was shared by everybody. Ethics was shared by everybody.
Hmm.
High standards, quality practice, that was shared by everybody. And so the public was one thing, and I think the other thing that people knew to accomplish that, you had to have people that knew what they were doing. You had to have accomplished planners. Well, at this stage, that gets into the programming. It gets into things like back then we had a mid-year conference. It was a practice management conference. We had the retreat that had started back in the years, in the 80s with the ICFP, and then of course they merged those two together, and you had a national meeting. But all of those meetings were to help people like me, a practitioner, and the people who work for me to do a better job of delivering those services to the end consumer. And so there was no difference in any of those. I obviously there are differences on how you may practice your business and how you structure, and there was still, back in those days, there was a lot of discussion of fee and commission and all that.
Hmm.
But there was the idea of doing what was best for the client was very uniform,
Sure.
and growing the practitioner so that they became better in their ability to deliver that end result product was shared by everybody.
Okay. And I'm interested, I mean, obviously, like you highlighted the registry as being kind of one of those issues
Yeah.
that came up, was a bit of a barrier to the merger happening. Was there any other resistance or challenge that surprised you along the way? And I mean, how did you guys actually navigate through that?
Well, you're probably talking. You remember, I had been out of leadership for a long time at that stage. I was back in the '80s, but we're in the 2000s about. So you talk to Lisa would be a good one, and there's others that you could contact. And I know you're going to, and I won't mention names because again, there's so many of them.
Yeah.
But they would probably be better at telling you the other tension points. I was so focused on getting the registry purchased, because I was on the ICFP board, the CFP Board of Standards. I mean, I was so focused on the CFP Board of Standards of getting that angst removed, and I didn't know any other way to do it but for the CFP board to buy it. That taken a lot of my attention. I pretty well left the details to the people that were in power. They knew them better, and they probably didn't want this old fart back in there trying to tell them what to do. So, I tried to kind of stay on the background of that, but I knew both sides. I had great respect for them, and I watched them go through. I had several friends on both. There have been friends of mine, and that was the crazy thing. I had great friends that were on the ICFP side, had great friends on the IAFP side. I'd been around at that time, even been around a real long time now, but had been around quite a bit at that time. And I really respected that they really tried to keep it at a high level, and they were all trying to do what was right. What you had on both sides, you had some tensions. Those are individual board members that had, some of them had personal agendas that was best for them one way or the other. And the those leaders had to work with that. But I think obviously they did a great job. as
Hmm.
we brought it together.
So, if you can, I want you to take us back even further because, again, you and I have talked about this. FPA's DNA goes back, and Dave Yeski often reminds me of this as well. Yeah, we're celebrating our 25th anniversary of the merger this year, but really, when you look at the roots of the association, it goes back 50 plus years.
Yes.
Um, and you and I have talked about this before that, the people who kind of, forged the profession the people who kind of kickstarted this
Yeah.
profession, the Lauren Duttons of the world.
Yes. Yeah.
I wonder if you can kind of share with everybody a little bit about some of those people going back
Oh,
to
sure.
the infamous meeting in the 60s, at
Oh,
the
yeah.
Hilton I think it's the O'Hare Hilton with Lauren Dutton and team. Maybe you can talk a little bit about some of that.
Well, I was fortunate. I knew most of those people and got to work with a lot of them. I worked with Lauren Dutton, and trust me, that was the experience that I'll never forget.
Sure.
But I also worked for Kay Beard. This is a guy that hired me in the business. Kay was the number 2 CFP in the world. He was the second guy to go across the stage to get the CFP mark. And Kay and I were close. He hired me, and we stayed close even after I left and set up my own company. We were close friends. In fact, I gave the eulogy at his funeral.
Hmm.
We're still close to his family. Great guy, but I knew other leaders. On one side you had Henry Montgomery, who was kind of a character, but I served with him on 2 boards. Served with him on the IAFP board, and I had also had an unusual situation. And an individual named Chuck Lepkowitz and I also served for 3 years on the ICFP board. We were on the IAFP board. I think that's about the only time they had crossover. So I got to know Henry in both situations.
Right.
And there were people, one of the great leaders, the great thought leaders, and one of the guys that could articulate, and one of the great motivators in bringing all this together was Don Petty. And Don was, they were so respected. Both groups were the one, they let him bring back the foundation for financial planning. Of course, Alex Armstrong was right there with him during all that. But I can name the names: Ron Melanson, Bob Spencer. I'm trying to think of some of the other people that I knew on the ICFP board. They were all great people, and they all had this great desire for financial planning to grow and to be known. I mean, the difference was they had their different philosophies on how to do it, and those weren't locked heads sometimes. But I knew them all, and I was fortunate. I stayed friends on both sides. I had good friends and still do from that whole era. But you go back to that group, you will not find one of them that was not 200% dedicated to improving this profession. I mean, several of them lost their companies because they spent so much time. Because a couple of them would, when there'd be an executive director would be out, they would go in and be acting, especially on the ICFP board. And they spent so much time on these boards, executive committees, they abandoned their business. That was good for me to observe. And I said, I'm not going to do that. That's not a good way to do it. I love what I'm doing. I'm going to give it a lot of time and energy, but I'm not going to totally abandon my business.
Sure.
Which a lot of them did. But it's fascinating to me. I've got a lot of my records, and you've seen the book, The History for Financial Planning, and I go back.
I have it on my shelf.
Well, I've got one on this desk. I've got one right here. And as I go back and review that, I remember a lot of these, like Charlie Hughes was the guy that stepped in to run the ICFP for years as executive director when they were out somebody, and he did a magnificent job, and just a charming person and a great leader, great communicator, and one of those guys that was always looking for a solution, not to create a problem.
Right.
Back in the very beginning, I'm not sure how all this started, because it started out of the same group. I've got a picture in one of my scrapbooks of that first class of CFPs, and I knew about half of them. Kim Fain was in that group too, along with my boss Kay Beard, and other people you would know or would have heard of. And it was fascinating. I don't know how we got so crossways, because it came out of the same group. And all that group came out of that group of 13 or 14 people that Don Petty was a part of, that heard all the stories. For example, these people that don't know some of the history, Lauren Dutton sold basically mutual fund companies, insurance companies on the idea of collaborating. And Don Petty tell me they would go into meetings and Lauren would go through his stuff. And at the end of the deal, they'd say, okay, Lauren, how much money do you need? And he'd tell them, and they'd all get out their checkbook and write a check. That's literally how it happened. That's how this thing was funded.
Right.
From these individual companies in the very beginning. So you think about that, and then we got it started, and then again, they started at college. And I remember I got 1,000 stories I could tell you about that. Because that was a little rough sledding for a while. And in the college, when they got the first graduates, that's when they formed the ICFP. And everything was roses and kisses in the beginning. And then I'm not sure what, I was still pretty young, and I certainly wasn't in the top leadership. And I'm not sure what got them crossways. But they, started from the very same group of people. So it goes back to this whole thing about coming back together. The karma was there for that to happen from the very beginning. It was unfortunate, some of the hard feelings. I mean, I was in some very difficult meetings. I never criticized, in my entire time on all these boards, and I've been on 3 of them, I've never criticized anybody personally. I've never done that. But tell you, I can promise you I took some real hits and personal hits, and so did most people in those positions. But for the most part, the people have really, the leaders always wanted to do the right thing. Kemp Fain was another leader, and Kemp and I had been friends. In fact, he was supposed to come in and run the Dallas office. And I was just in my second year. I couldn't much starving to death. And here's a successful guy coming in, who's going to help me learn how to build my business. And then the company we were with kind of blew up. That didn't happen. But Kemp and I met and became friends. So when we were heading the organizations at the same time, Kemp and I got together and we said, look, this is going to be a tough year. We got these 2 organizations they're headstrong, going in different directions. We're going to butt heads during the year. The thing we don't want to do is we don't want to lose our friendship. So people would sometimes be amazed. Kemp and I would be in those meetings, and I mean, we were tough. I mean, we'd go at each other and go on these things, not personally, but go on the issues really hard. And voice would raise, faces would get red and all that. And then, 3 hours later, they'd see Kemp and I out having dinner. and people couldn't understand that. They didn't understand, because those meetings were tough. I mean, I don't know that they've had any meetings like that since that time.
Sure.
They were really tough meetings. And but Kemp and I never lost our friendship. He was a friend of mine. Unfortunately, we lost him too early.
Yeah.
And so they go back to those leaders, which was kind of going back to your question. Let me just sum it up with saying, if you ask me about some of them specific, I probably will know and can make a comment on them. But as a group, they were all dedicated to making this profession the profession we enjoy today. There was no, every one of them. And I will tell you, though, that sometimes, I was a young president of the IAFP. I was in my early 30s or something. That's pretty young. And obviously was not probably was not one of their better presidents because of, but I remember there was a guy named Lou Walensky from Los Angeles. And Lou was we'd get down on it. We'd go through this long discussion, kind of heated, and would finally come up to a motion that would pass. This happened probably 10 times. And Lou would raise his hand and say, Bill, and I'd recognize him. And he'd come up with this thing, well, have y'all thought about this? And we hadn't. And I thanked Lou a million times because he probably kept us from making several bad decisions.
Sure.
He was a squeaky wheel. I was open-minded enough to recognize him because they knew he was always going to blow the thing up. When the discussion is all over, the vote was ready to take, and he's the last one. I knew it probably wasn't going to go the way that I thought it was going to go, but that was good. So we had a lot of people like him on both boards.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes we probably looked at those people, at least the people in power, like I was sometimes, kind of shake your head like, gosh, I just wish they weren't even on this board. And yet they're probably some of the people that helped shape this profession more than anybody, because they stepped back, took some time to really think through things where maybe the rest of us got caught up in emotion or just wanted to move on to something else, and they would prevented us from doing it. So there were some unique people all the way through that were like that. And then again, I've been fortunate enough. I was on that original committee with Don Petty to put the foundation back together, and I got to watch what Alex Armstrong did. My goodness.
Yeah.
What an incredible feat that she has done.
Oh yeah. I mean, I had Alex on FPA Live towards the beginning of the year. And I mean, she's somebody that you can literally just talk to for hours.
Yes.
I mean, the amount of stuff that she's been personally responsible for. Yeah. It's really amazing. And I mean, look, this is the thing that's always amazed me about people like you, Bill. And this is true of today's leaders as well. You're doing this because of your love for the profession, right? You're not doing, you're not raising your hand to take on a volunteer role to lead the profession, let alone the association, because you've got a nice pension coming your way from FPA or IAFP, right?
No, that doesn't come from those organizations.
It doesn't happen with FPA, and so, and the fact is that you are running, you're a financial planner, you're running a business, you've got teams of people, so the fact that you raised your hand as much as you have over decades of service to the profession should be applauded and thanked for that. And I mean, and not just you, but everyone who's kind of came before FPA and everyone who's kind of currently leading the association today. This is they're doing it because they love the profession. I think that's great. I'm interested in hearing for a minute or two from you, like, what are some of your fondest memories of your involvement in IAFP and FPA? As you think about like your career and where it's gone, what are some of those fond memories that you have?
Well, one of them was actually the registry. I was real proud of getting it through when it got through, because I thought it's provided to the public a way to find real financial planners. And so I was real proud of that. And then I ended up being the one helping dismantle it or helping getting it sold and out of the deal. I didn't dismantle it, by the way. That came with a different group. I wasn't real happy about that. But that was a great feeling, watching us expand overseas, in some of the international conferences that were started under the IAFP. I found that fun, and I found it interesting, and I learned a lot. I remember I don't remember what country I was sitting in. Some guy was speaking, and they were talking about investing in this country and that country. And anyway, I said something about the U.S., and he looked at me and he said, well, Mr. Carter, you realize that in the last 20 years, y'all haven't even been in the top 10 stock markets in the world, or top 20. And that really made me think, maybe I need to look a little broader than where we invest clients' money. There's some funny stories but probably I shouldn't talk about those. But just the things that I enjoyed with the people. Working with Kent Fain, Don Petty, Alex Armstrong, Kay Beard, Ross Levin, John Cahill, Herky Harris, Bill Shearer. I could go on and on and on. And going back to the original leaders, Bob Spencer and Ron Melanson and others that were there in the very beginning, Henry Montgomery. And there's some other people with the ICFP that I'm leaving out. I'm about to turn 79, so I'm forgetting names every once in a while these days. But I've really enjoyed the people. I still have relationships with a lot of them, and all the new leaders that have come up after me. All of them have exceeded my expectations. I've been so proud of this. You go back from the 80s forward and look at these boards and the people on them, the people that ended up in leadership positions in our organizations. I know most of them. Most of them are friends of mine. And I enjoy seeing them at conferences. I enjoy catching up with them. And I'm just always appreciative of their contributions to our profession. It's been fun for me. You just think about it. I go back nearly at the very beginning, and I knew the people that were at the very beginning. And so to be able to go from there to where we are today, that's a long journey. This is I'm about to start my 53rd year. Or 54th year, I think 53rd year. Getting that memory at 79 gets you And so it's been a wonderful journey. It's been, I've enjoyed it. There were times that were tough, and there were, it had its challenges, but that's what made it meaningful. If it didn't have all that, don't think it would be as meaningful or as gratifying as it has been for me to have been able to be a part of that through nearly the entire journey of our profession.
Yeah. So, I mean, I got a couple more simple questions for you, and then I'm
Okay.
going to let you go because you've been very generous with your time. You know, and again, this is 2025 is the 25th anniversary of the merger. As you look ahead to the next 25 years, what role do you hope FPA will play in the advancement of the financial planning profession?
Well, let me think about that. Well, one goes back to the original thing is, educating the planner, uh, and which I think is very important, so that they provide a better service to the public.
Hmm.
I will go back. That's just a part of my philosophical view. I think the thing that is good is we finally decided the CFP is going to be the place to go if you're going to get financial planning. And of course, the CFP board's doing a phenomenal job under Kevin Keller. But the IAFP, the FPA, I mean, is embracing that, and they have been for a while, but they're doing it. The other thing that I think that the FPA is doing that they lost for a while, which I think is important, is bringing the product companies back in. You can't do this business without product. I mean, you can have a plan, but you got to implement it. You can't
Hmm.
implement it with air. So I think bringing them back in so that the people have an opportunity to interview with and develop, and hopefully we're teaching them how to do a better job in due diligence. I can promise you the broker dealers today are doing a much better job in due diligence, but you got to have all of that. So I just think it's all come together extremely well. And the FPA, under the new vision, I've looked at all your new material, and you've renamed the conferences. I am so excited the FPA has kind of re-identified themselves.
Yeah.
It's like you've gone through kind of a lull here for a while, and now before we got onto this, I was relating to you. The vibe was different this year at that FPA convention. It was just different, and I wasn't hearing people complain. I was hearing people talk about how much they enjoyed it, and the fact that you're bringing other companies, encouraging them to bring people in. I think the FPA right now has the best vision with the best leadership that I've seen in the last 20 years. So I think you have to go back to the very beginning to match it.
Yeah.
And so I'm extremely excited about it. I walked out of the FPA, when I walked out there to get in the car to go to the airport, I just had a smile on my face thinking, this is great.
Good.
They're back on track with great leadership and great vision and great implementation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm really excited. I mean, sometimes it's easy for organizations to get a little stagnant.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about what the future has in store. And obviously, I mean, we were talking about Dennis Moore, who
Yes.
you know very well
I know
because he's
him
a
extremely well.
fellow Texan. Granted, he is a Red Raider, and I know that. I know
Yeah.
you guys have some friendly tension between
Oh,
the
yeah.
two of you, but yeah, I mean, I think really some the best years are really ahead for us right now. Before I let you go, I do, because again, you're somebody with so many years of really just outstanding leadership in this profession. What you know few words of advice would you give to today's and tomorrow's leaders as they carry the torch forward?
Oh, I don't know that they need any advice from me, quite frankly. I think they would do very well without any advice from Bill Carter. I think one is maintain the vision. You've got to keep that vision of where you're going. Everything else will fall into place. The mission statement, the objectives, the conferences, all that will fall in place as long as they keep the vision to the forefront and everybody keeps in mind exactly what they're trying to accomplish. And based on my meeting with the past presidents, with you and the other staff and the current leadership, my opinion is y'all have got that captured. Y'all have got that, and I just hope you don't lose it,
Yeah.
because if you don't, the FPA is just going to flourish in the coming years.
Yeah. Well, I completely agree. And anyway, Bill, look, I mean, we've kept you on here for 35 minutes. I'm going to let you go, but I want to just say, I know a lot of people at FPA would echo this sentiment. Thank you for everything that you've done for not only FPA but for financial planning. You've been a true rock for really the association, the profession, and again, I know that we're going to constantly be coming to you for words of advice and encouragement and everything along the way, and we know that you're going to be there. Bill Carter's not going away, so. But again, thank you for everything you've done. You've meant a lot to FPA and the profession. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Ben. You've been a very gracious host, and I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate that, Bill. Listen, thank you again so much, and I'll look forward to seeing you here at one of the upcoming newly branded FPA events
I
in
will be at retreat.
2026.
I'll see you there.
FPA Shift.
Yes, Shift. That's right.
FPA Shift. Yes, yes. And actually, just so everybody knows, we are going to be launching the new FPA Shift website here very soon, and an email will be going out to announce that registration's open.
Yeah.
So,
well, that goes back to what I was telling you. Y'all got great leadership right now. You got a great vision, and you're doing things right. Really proud of all of you.
Well, we certainly appreciate it. Anyway, right. Bill, thank you so much again. Appreciate you taking the time.
You're welcome.
All right. Let me go ahead and close this out. Everybody, again, that was Bill Carter, just a really legendary figure in financial planning and in FPA's history. Cannot thank Bill and all of our founding leaders enough for everything they've meant to us as a profession and us as an association. And I want to remind all of you that all of our FPA lives are available on demand at fpahub.org. That's fpahub.org. You actually see it right on your screen. So why I said it twice, I don't know. Anyway, we are going to be taking a little bit of hiatus for the Thanksgiving holiday next week, but we will be back on December 3rd with a really great episode with 3 of the really big academic leaders to explore the state of college financial planning programs. Really excited about that. You'll see some promotion about that coming up here real soon. And anyway, until that time, I hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday, and we'll see you next time on FPA Live.